Okay, my wonderful friends. Once again, we're going to be talking about Immanuel Velikovsky. Now, I showed in the last presentation his preface from 1965, which was 15 years after he originally wrote the book. This is his original preface to his original book, 1950 Collisions, Worlds in Collision. Now, here it goes, and this again is by James Cameron Stewart, Audible, and it's available for anyone, and it's in the Internet Archives of research. So here it goes, and this is Immanuel Velikovsky, his words spoken by James Cameron Stewart. Here it goes.
Sphere that took place in historical times. In these wars, the planet Earth participated too. This book describes two acts of a great drama, one that occurred 34 to 35 centuries ago, in the middle of the second millennium before the present era, the other in the 8th and the beginning of the 7th century before the present era.
All right, so there's two encounters that were serious. 3,500 years ago, approximately, was, I believe, the Great Flood. And then after that, there was more cataclysms. But the major one, I believe, was 3,500 years ago.
26 centuries ago. Accordingly, this volume consists of two parts, preceded by a prologue. Harmony, or stability, in the celestial and terrestrial spheres is the point of departure of the present-day concept of the world, as expressed in the celestial mechanics of Newton and the theory of evolution of Darwin. If these two men of science are sacrosanct, this book is a heresy. However, modern physics of atoms and of the quantum theory describes dramatic changes in the microcosm, the atom, the prototype of the solar system. A theory, then, that envisages not dissimilar events in the macrocosm, the solar system, brings the modern concepts of physics to the celestial sphere. This book is written for the instructed and uninstructed alike. No formula and no hieroglyphic will stand in the way of those who set out to read it. If occasionally historical evidence does not square with formulated laws, it should be remembered that a law is but a deduction from experience and experiment, and therefore laws must conform with historical facts, not facts with laws. One is not asked to accept a theory without question. Rather, he is invited to consider for himself whether he is listening to a book of fiction or non-fiction, whether what he is listening to is invention or historical fact. On one point alone, not necessarily decisive for the theory of cosmic catastrophism, I borrow credence. I use a synchronical scale of Egyptian and Hebrew histories which is not orthodox. It was in the spring of 1940 that I came upon the idea that in the days of the Exodus, as evident from many passages of the Scriptures, there occurred a great physical catastrophe, and that such an event could serve in determining the time of the Exodus in Egyptian history, or in establishing a synchronical scale for the histories of the peoples concerned. Thus I started Ages in Chaos, a reconstruction of the history of the ancient world from the middle of the second millennium before the present era to the advent of Alexander the Great. Already in the fall of that same year, 1940, I felt that I had acquired an understanding of the real nature and extent of that catastrophe, and for 9 years I worked on both projects, the political and the natural histories. Although Ages in Chaos was finished first, in the order of publication, it will follow this work. Worlds in Collision.
This work is Worlds in Collision, and what he's trying to do is draw a timeline of when these events occurred, based on the writings around the world, not just one set of writings, but based on all the historical documentation from all the cultures. And that's what he did. And he found that some of the things that were written could be explained by some of this spectacular evidence, which was discounted because of the spectacularness of its nature. It's just too much for the average mind to believe, because it's based on what we always called the mythology, which was just silly stuff they wrote. And it's not silly stuff. It was historically factual documentation recording these events during our recent past, basically. And Velikovsky was the only one that had guts to stand up and say, let's look at this a little closer. And he took a beating for it.
Collision comprises only the last two acts of the cosmic drama. A few earlier acts, one of them known as the Deluge, will be the subject of another volume of natural history. The historical cosmological story of this book is based on the evidence of historical texts of many peoples around the globe, on classical literature, on epics of northern races, on sacred books of the peoples of the Orient and Occident, on traditions and folklore of primitive peoples, on old astronomical inscriptions and charts, on archaeological finds, and also on geological and paleontological material.
I want to make a point before we go any further. My interpretation is that the interaction of Venus against Earth was the Great Deluge. Now, he sort of intimated that it was not really within these two events, 3,500 years ago, and the other one later than that, or earlier than that. Well, you know what I'm talking about. There was one at 3,500 years ago, and then I guess there was one about 800 years later, something like that. This is what we're going to learn. This is what we're trying to figure out. But he just said that he would do another one about the deluge. Now, I think the deluge was the 3,500 year event when Venus almost hit Earth. That was the true deluge. That was the boiling of the waters, the killing of all the giants. And that's my interpretation. Now, this is something we're going to have to go through, in detail, because, I mean, there's a lot of details here. So this is going to be quite a long endeavor. All right, so let's pick it up from here.
If cosmic upheavals occurred in the historical past, why does not the human race remember them? And why was it necessary to carry on research to find out about them? I discuss this problem in the section The Collective Amnesia. The task I had to accomplish was not unlike that faced by a psychoanalyst who, out of disassociated memories and dreams, reconstructs a forgotten traumatic experience in the early life of an individual. In an analytical experiment on mankind, historical inscriptions and legendary motifs often play the same role as recollections, infantile memories, and dreams in the analysis of a personality. Can we, out of this polymorphous material, establish actual facts? We shall check one people against another, one inscription against another, epics against charts, geology against legends, until we are able to extract the historical facts. In a few cases, it is impossible to say with certainty whether a record or a tradition refers to one or another catastrophe that took place through the ages. It is also probable that in some traditions, various elements from different ages are fused together. In the final analysis, however, it is not so essential to segregate definitively the records of single world catastrophes. More important, it seems, is to establish 1. That there were physical upheavals of a global character in historical times, 2. That these catastrophes were caused by extraterrestrial agents, and 3. That these agents can be identified. There are many implications that follow from these conclusions. I refer to them in the epilogue so that I can omit reference to them here. The years when Ages in Chaos and Worlds in Collision were written were years of a world catastrophe created by man. of war that was fought on land, on sea, and in the air. During that time, man learned how to take apart a few of the bricks of which the universe is built, the atoms of uranium. If one day he should solve the problem of the fission and fusion of the atoms of which the crust of the earth or its water and air are composed, he may perchance, by initiating a chain reaction, take this planet out of the struggle for survival among the members of the celestial sphere.
Okay, then we have discovered exactly how to take the whole planet out of the celestial sphere, and let's just hope it doesn't happen. But I have also discovered what the atom is constructed of, and it is constructed of dipoles. That I have also presented, and I believe that it is hard to question the evidence, because I produce evidence. I'm a material scientist. None of the things I say are without evidence. Now, what we're doing here is we're looking at the recorded documentation, and then we are going to apply the evidence that we have discovered against this recorded history. Does it match up? Does it make sense? So let's get started. Okay, this is the prologue to Worlds in Collision, and here it comes.
Prologue. Chapter 1. In an immense universe. Quota pars operis tenti nobis committitur. Seneca. In an immense universe, a little globe revolves around a star. It is the third in the row, Mercury, Venus, Earth, of the planetary family. It is of a solid core covered over most of its surface with liquid, and it has a gaseous envelope. Living creatures fill the liquid, other living creatures fly in the gas, and still others creep and walk upon the ground on the bottom of the gaseous ocean. Man, a being of erect stature, thinks himself the prince of creation. He felt like this long before he, by his own efforts, came to know how to fly on wings of metal around the globe. He felt godlike long before he could talk to his fellow man on the other side of the globe. Today, he can see the microcosm in a drop and the elements in the stars. He knows the laws governing the living cell with its chromosomes, and the laws governing the macrocosm of the sun, moon, planets, and stars. He assumes that gravitation keeps the planetary system together, man and beast on their planet, the sea within its borders. For millions and millions of years, he maintains, the planets have rolled along on the same paths, and their moons around them, and man, in these eons, has arisen from a one-cell infusorium all the long way up the ladder to his status of Homo sapiens. Is man's knowledge now nearly complete? Are only a few more steps necessary to conquer the universe, to extract the energy of the atom? Since this has been written, it has already been done. To cure cancer, to control genetics, to communicate with other planets, and learn if they have living creatures too? Here begins Homo ignoramus. He does not know what life is, or how it came to be, and whether it originated from inorganic matter. He does not know whether other planets of this sun or of other suns have life on them, and if they have, whether the forms of life there are like those around us, ourselves included. He does not know how this solar system came into being, although he has built up a few hypotheses about it. He knows only that the solar system was constructed billions of years ago. He does not know what this mysterious force of gravitation is that holds him and his fellow man on the other side of the planet with their feet on the ground, although he regards the phenomenon itself as the law of laws. He does not know what the earth looks like 5 miles under his feet. He does not know how mountains came into existence or what caused the emergence of the continents, although he builds hypotheses about these, nor does he know from where oil came. Again, hypotheses. He does not know why, only a short time ago, a thick glacial sheet pressed upon most of Europe and North America, as he believes it did, nor how palms could grow above the polar circle, nor how it came about that the same fauna filled the inner lakes of the Old and the New World. He does not know where the salt in the sea came from.
All right, basically, we don't know anything about about where we live. We have made all these assumptions, and they have proven to be wrong. And I have shown them to be wrong. The planet is made of creatures. The planet is made of creatures' bodies. That's all I can find. And the stuff that's coming from us from space is also parts of creatures' bodies. I've shown this pretty well. So anybody that wants to discuss this in the academic realm, I am certainly willing. But most people that are not in the academic realm can easily understand this and have seen it and agree. All right, I just want to make a couple of quick statements before we continue. There is no one, and I don't care who it is, can tell me where God came from, if there was a God and created everything that there is. Nobody can say that whatsoever. They claim there's a big bang, but well, that's ridiculous. Where'd it come from? And now they realize it's not right. And all of the science communicators are coming out now and saying the Big Bang was a big mistake. And it was. And so is evolution. Evolution's not right. There was gods here that created all kinds of crazy creatures. There's no question about that. Even Yale agrees with this, the same thing, that the creatures that were here that died in the Great Flood, there's nothing like that even exists anymore. Giants, dragons, all that stuff. And the paper, well, hold on, let me just show you the paper. No, here it is right here. Silica-rich oceans caused exceptional preservation of soft-bodied creatures. That's what I show is the mud fossils. And this was written a year after I presented all this work to Yale and to Derek Briggs himself. And they agree 100%. All it was silica-rich, salts, all that. Of course, he dismissed me and took credit for the work. Now, they also present here in this Yale paper that they figured out all this stuff. And it says many of the creatures, outright bizarre in appearance, do not resemble any organisms alive today, said Lydia Tarhan from Yale, first author. And, of course, Derek Briggs was also on this paper. And they said, are these organisms some sort of failed evolutionary experiment? And yes, that's exactly what they were. All right, and then they can't figure out how these fossils are able to form. They have no clue, to be honest with you. I know exactly how it happened. And also I told them, I said, this could have happened within days, and it did. And they say it enabled the transformation of the animals into rock to occur over a matter of hours or years rather than the usual time frame, thousands to millions of years. And, Ediacara organisms are rapidly buried by sand, which is actually mud. They throw in the sand because I said it was mud fossils. They have to throw in sand. It was just a theft of my work, basically, from Yale. And this is when they talked about October 2016. I published my book in January 2016, chastising them for their treatment of me and Velikovsky and all the rest. So now, obviously, Velikovsky didn't have that acknowledgement by Yale that, yes, there was a great flood, and yes, it created all these mud fossils. I don't think Velikovsky knew about the mud fossils either, but he did know that this was a worldwide catastrophe, and all of the mechanisms that occurred I can fully understand now because they created everything that I see now and that I have been presenting for years now. And it's time to look at this in a more constructive way other than, as just something sort of fun. This is our real history, and this is our real future. I'm going to be honest with you. This does not stop today.
Although man knows that he has lived on this planet for millions of years, he finds a recorded history of only a few thousand years. And even these few thousand years are not sufficiently well known. Why did the Bronze Age precede the Iron Age, even though iron is more widely distributed over the world and its manufacture is simpler than that of the alloy of copper and tin? By what mechanical means were structures of immense blocks built on the high mountains of the Andes? What caused the legend of the flood to originate in all the countries of the world? Is there any adequate meaning to the term antediluvian? From what experiences grew the eschatological pictures of the end of the world? In this work, of which the present book is the first part, some of these questions will be answered, but only at the cost of giving up certain notions now regarded as sacred laws in science, the millions of years of the present constitution of the solar system, and the harmonious revolution of the Earth, with all their implications as regards the theory of evolution. The celestial harmony. The sun rises in the east and sets in the west. The day consists of 24 hours. The year consists of 365 days, 5 hours and 49 minutes. The moon circles around the earth, changing its phases, crescent, full, decrescent. The terrestrial axis points in the direction of the polar star. After winter comes spring, then summer and fall. These are common facts. Are they invariable laws? Must it be so forever? Was it so always? The sun has 9 planets. Mercury has no satellites, Venus has no satellites, the Earth has a moon, Mars has 2 small trabants, mere pieces of rock, and one of them completes its month before Mars ends its day. Jupiter has 11 moons and 11 different kinds of months to count. Saturn has 9 moons, Uranus has 5 moons, Neptune 1, Pluto none. Was it always so? Will it be so forever? The sun rotates in an easterly direction. All planets revolve in their orbits in the same direction, counterclockwise if seen from the north, around the sun. Most of their moons revolve counterclockwise, in direct motion, but there are a few that revolve in the opposite direction, in retrograde motion. No orbit is an exact circle. There is no regularity in the eccentrical shapes of the planetary orbits. Each elliptical curve verges in a different direction. It is not known for certain, but it is assumed that Mercury permanently shows the same face to the sun as our moon does with respect to the Earth. Information obtained by different methods of observation of Venus is contradictory. It is not known whether Venus rotates so slowly that its day equals its year, or so rapidly that the night side is never sufficiently cooled. Mars rotates in 24 hours, 37 minutes, 22.6 seconds, mean period, a period comparable to the terrestrial day. Jupiter, which in volume is 1,300 times larger than the Earth, completes a rotation in the short space of 9 hours and 50 minutes. What causes this variability? It is not a law that a planet must rotate or have days and nights, still less that its day and night must return every 24 hours. If Pluto rotates from east to west, it has the sun rising in the west.
I just want to make a point here. He's saying that there is no law here, that why would it always have to be a 24-hour day? Some days could be longer, some days could be shorter. That's not what I'm taking from him. Let's think about it in that respect. Well, there is a basic law, and it's the scrub of what we're scrubbing through. So it depends on what's hitting us that we have to push against. If it's something harder hitting us, more heavy, dense atmosphere and particles in space and magnetic fields, we're hitting it, we're going to slow down. He's right. I agree with that 100%. But it appears that the inner solar system is somewhat fairly consistent. Although we do see these pulses coming out of the sun every now and then where it must have been hit by something much stronger And you see this in the arms of the Milky Way. Let me show you what the Milky Way looks like and what we have to plow ourselves through. Because all this stuff has to be taken into consideration if you really want to understand the solar system and how Jupiter interacted and Venus and all that stuff. It gets deep. So you're going to have to get deep. All right, don't forget, these are his words from 1950. From the prologue to Wilson Collision.
Uranus has the sun rising and setting neither in the east nor in the west. So it is not a law that a planet of the solar system must rotate from west to east and that the sun must rise in the east. The equator of the Earth is inclined to the plane of its ecliptic at an angle of 23.5 degrees. This causes the change of seasons during the annual revolution around the Sun. The axes of other planets point in the directions of seemingly deliberate choice. It is not a general law for all planets that winter must follow fall and summer the spring. The axis of Uranus is placed almost in the plane of its orbit. For about 20 years, one of its polar regions is the hottest place on the planet. Then night gradually descends, and 20 years later, the other pole enters the tropics for an equal length of time. The Moon has no atmosphere. It is not known whether Mercury has any atmosphere. Venus is covered with dense clouds, but not of water vapor. Mars has a transparent atmosphere, but almost without oxygen or water vapor, and its composition is unknown. Jupiter and Saturn have gaseous envelopes. It is not known whether they have solid cores. It is not a general law that a planet must have atmosphere or water. Mars is 0.15 of the volume of the Earth. The next planet, Jupiter, is about 8,750 times as large as Mars. There is no regularity of or relation between the size of the planets and their position in the system. On Mars are seen canals and polar caps. On the Moon, craters. The Earth has reflecting oceans. Venus has brilliant clouds. Jupiter has belts and a red spot. Saturn has rings. The celestial harmony is composed of bodies different in size, different in form, different in the velocity of rotation, with differently directed axes of rotation, with different directions of rotation, with differently composed atmospheres or without atmospheres, with a varying number of moons or without moons, and with satellites revolving in either direction.
That's some serious variety. I really haven't thought about it in that much variety, all packed in this one little solar system. But when you see how the planets really move, and let me show you that right now just so we can get past that. Okay, this is a solar eclipse. That way there we can see the radiation from the sun, but we can't see the disk of the sun, which blinds us from the actual light. So what we're seeing is radiated light coming from the sun. Well, here's why it's radiating all that light. It's from the scrub of the particles of the sun. Way out here is where the heat is coming down against it because the heat is being created way out here. The same thing for us. Our atmosphere scrubs out here. It's 2,700 degrees way up here and 100 or so on the Earth. Here it's 10,000 on here and up to millions out here. And there's a zone, it's called a corona. And for us it's called the ionosphere. And those are the zones of intense scrub. Simple as that. All right, this is what appears to just happen automatically in space, that everything spins. And it's spinning, and the arms of the galaxy are bending backwards because they are concussing with what's in front of it. Everything seems to have a spin to it. And the tighter, closer the core, the tighter the molecules are crushing each other, creating more and more energy. Now, if we are on one of these arms of the Milky Way, we are being pulled forward through whatever's in front of us. If we're going into a blank zone, we're not too bad. If we're going into a really dense zone, that is going to heat us up. It's going to cause these cosmic emissions, the solar emissions blasting out from the sun. All of a sudden, and it hit something dense. It hit a little dense spot somewhere. That's the only thing that creates increased energy, is density. And don't forget, we're not on a record player spinning straight around. We're getting ripped through one of those arms of the galaxy, which means that the heaviest, densest part, which is the sun, it precedes everybody, and we follow, all spinning around trying to catch up to the sun. It's a tug and pull against these balls of matter. All right, because that is gravity, and gravity is very, very enormous radiation. Just hydrogen itself has a 21 centimeter line, which means it influences other particles 21 centimeters away from itself. Okay, my outstanding friends, sometimes everything just comes together like so perfectly, it's amazing. And this is one of those times. I have been talking about Immanuel Velikovsky and his research into the ancient catastrophe that caused devastation on Earth. Now, somebody tipped me off to this today. Mohenjo-Daro. This is Mohenjo-Daro 101 from the National Geographic Society, and they're going to talk about this. It's only a couple minutes long. This was a very, very advanced civilization, and it all of a sudden became missing from the historic record. Everybody just left, basically, and they really don't understand it. And now they have just done some recent excavations which shed some very, very, very interesting light on this. Let's just see what they had to say. This goes back 6 years ago. So let's see what they had to say in this particular documentary. Then we'll go into the new evidence. Okay, once again, fair use. I just want to examine this so we can understand what our ancient past was like. So I'm just going to let this play, and you can listen to what it has to say.
The ancient city of Mohenjo-Daro is one of the first urban centers in human history. Nestled in southern Pakistan's Indus River Valley, Mohenjo-Daro is the largest and best preserved city of the Indus civilization, the earliest known civilization of the Indian subcontinent. Mohenjo-Daro was built around 2500 BC, about the same time the Great Pyramids were being built in Egypt, and it spanned a surface area of nearly 500 acres, an incredible size for a city of this time period. Because of Mohenjo-Daro's grand scale, archaeologists believe it may have served as a seat of power for the Indus civilization. The city was divided into two districts, the Citadel and the Lower Town. The Citadel is home to the city's exceptional monuments, including the Great Bath, a 900 square foot tank fed from the Indus River. Mohenjo-Daro also had a sophisticated water system. Houses had baths and toilets, and the town featured both an elaborate sewage system and fresh water in 700 wells throughout the city. The Roman baths, some of history's most famous waterway systems, weren't constructed until many hundreds of years after Mohenjo-Daro's Great Bath. Mohenjo-Daro has no places of worship or governance, such as palaces, royal tombs, or temples. This may indicate that the society was not built around state interests like the Egyptian and Mesopotamian societies at the time. Rather, the class structure of Mohenjo-Daro may have been relatively equal. The city's second district, the Lower Town, may demonstrate the society's egalitarian structure. The Lower Town, with its intricate water system, was home to between 20,000 to 40,000 people. Unlike many urban areas of its time, it was laid out in a grid system similar to modern-day city blocks. After approximately 600 years, the city collapsed. No one is quite sure why, but the cause could potentially have been a change within the culture, or in the path of the river. Without it...
All right, I just want to make a statement, because we're going to be going into this later. She gave it the date of the state of the time the city was begun, and then the time they just vanished. And the city remained, but the inhabitants vanished. And there was other evidences that have been recently understood that we'll be talking about in a minute. But we're going to go through these. When it was founded, 600 years later, well, let's just go back and revisit that so we don't miss what she just said. It was laid out in city blocks, just like today.
After approximately 600 years, the city collapsed. No one is quite sure why, but the cause could potentially have been a change within the culture, or in the path of the river. Without its crucial source of water, the city's residents may have moved away, leaving Mohenjo-Daro nearly abandoned. In 1911, nearly 4,000 years after the city fell into ruin, archaeologists paid their first visit. The ensuing decades of excavations have unearthed countless clues that tell the tale of Mohenjo-Daro, but it still holds secrets for us to discover.
All right, and we are going to do that now. Okay, my friends, this was sent to me today by my friend John Hernandez, and it's about Mohenjo-Daro and their recent finds about nuclear radiation there, and these vitrified buildings and these vaporized creatures and people. Listen to this now.
Is the haunting site of Mohenjo-Daro, which was part of ancient India. Some researchers had conducted a few surveys on this site which shocked them to their cores. No one, to this day, knows where the inhabitants of this flourishing site go. There are no signs of violent clashes, meteorite impacts, or any other cataclysm, but researchers found these disturbing skeletons lying on its streets. Then a British archaeologist named David Davenport came here to study these abandoned skeletons, and what he found was about to shock the entire world. According to his reports, these skeletons showed a level of radiation which was witnessed in Hiroshima and Nagasaki when nuclear bombs were dropped there. The rocks were completely vitrified, and you will be shocked to know that similar rock samples were also found in the Egyptian desert on the border with Libya. Some have even hypothesized that the Egyptian land was once thriving with forests and wildlife, but powerful nuclear detonations in distant antiquity have left it barren and dry.
Okay, this is Mohenjo-Daro, and they say that the rocks were completely vitrified in certain spots, and the buildings literally melted. And that's exactly what it says in the ancient texts. The mountains turned to wax and melted, where the exact impact was of Venus into the atmosphere. It would be much more intense than a nuclear blast, and it would have all of the same, elements would be in this. That would be in a nuclear blast. There's no difference whatsoever. All it is extreme compression of particles and forcing them to turn into different types of molecules than normally are present in nature. And then they would decay. Normally they try to get back to being normal particles, but some of them wouldn't decay, and they would form, well, they would decay, but not, you'd still see residue of it, or different layering of like thorium and so forth. There's signatures that you would see that would be only normally from like a nuclear explosion, but this is just the same as a nuclear explosion, and this is exactly what would account for everybody vaporized. And it was they were vaporized above the waist. I did a video on not this area, but one in that area. It was in the Middle East, but it wasn't too far off. And they had a similar event happen there, and they've just been doing that excavation and finding all kinds of things they never expected. Same thing as this. So and all these people were just gone. 1500 BC, they just disappeared. And they say, why would it happen? Oh, maybe a drought, maybe a this, maybe a that, maybe they just they weren't happy anymore, well, whatever. But I say it was from exactly what Velikovsky recorded. Now, what would be the signature there? It would be the Triassic layer. We should be able to find that somewhere in this region quite easily if it's right. If I'm correct in what I'm saying. Okay, so a little diversion there from Immanuel Velikovsky, but these are the things that support the statements that he made. And these are new discoveries and revelations that he had no idea about. So everything that he was presenting of the documented history appears to be very well supported now. So this is running a little long today, so let's pick it up in the next, part 3, and we're just going to continue on. There's a lot to this, and this is just worlds in collision, and it gets into Mars and Venus and all that stuff. So it's going to be a while. All right. Thank you, and I love you all.